Joe, nice to see you.
Nice
Here
to
we are.
see you.
I'm at Ringwood. You're on the south coast. It's raining all round, but at least we're
It
standing
really
outside. So, Joe, I first met you, I don't know how many years ago now, but I know that your main work, as far as the parish is concerned, is youth, children, and families development worker. That's a mouthful if ever there was one.
it
But
is.
I think it's because I'm more involved in the more staid services of the parish, and you're doing the more exciting things. That's probably why we don't meet too often. But it's
Yeah,
great to talk to you today for this Saturday conversation.
and you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Uh, when I realised, I don't know when I realised that you were half Italian, but I ought to recognise that from your face. But I'm just trying to think, what are our connections with Italy? Certainly, when I did my first trip to Israel, we came back through the length of Italy, from the toe to the top, as it were, driving back from Israel in 1964. So that was one. And then my eldest granddaughter has been teaching English in Pisa for a year. And then I took a group to Sicily. And that started to ring bells. But then, of course, my main interest, I suppose, is the Italian job. It can't be anything else, can it? It's got to be the Italian job.
It's one of those iconic films, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. It's a cliffhanger at the end, isn't it? Just tell me what it's like. I mean, we've got a different way of thinking, I suppose, just the English folks. But what's it like being half Italian? What do you think of the British being, all those who are all British like us?
I think one of the things about being, am I allowed to say this, half and half?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
being mixed race, if you like,
Yeah,
being mixed, having a mixed cultural background. Yeah, I don't really know how to find the right words for that. But anyway, but for me, being half Italian, half English, obviously has massive implications for you in your life. So I grew up in Watford, which is a very multicultural part of the country. And there are lots of Italians in Watford as well. And places like Leighton Buzzard and Dunstable, and there's a real heart of Italian culture in those areas. So growing up half Italian, we quite often mixed with my dad's friends, and they always spoke Italian. But interestingly, as a child, I never learnt Italian. I learnt Italian much later, when I had my first boyfriend, if I'm honest. And he couldn't speak English, so that was really the motivation to actually learn. But now, and then I spent a year in Italy and everything, so that's why I describe myself as bilingual. And I suppose if you think that I can speak to you like this in English, e poi posso anche parlare in italiano, I suppose that does make me bilingual. I don't know. But anyway, so grew up with my lots of my dad's friends, as I say, were Italian. We always had Italians around the house. My dad had Italian restaurants. So I had this upbringing of knowing lots of different Italians from different parts of Italy. And I just thought that was just my life. So I didn't really know anything different from that. And it was only moving down to Christchurch that I realised actually how different my life had been to the vast majority of people who are British. And all of that has implications for how you behave. So Italians are very, I mean, I can't speak for every single last Italian, obviously, but I can only speak for the ones that I know and from the ones that are in my immediate family. But especially Sicilians, they're such warm people. They're so affectionate, they're so passionate, so their voices are up here, and their hands are everywhere as well. So yeah, for me, I just grew up in this environment. So when I moved down to Christchurch, which was actually 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, for me, it's like a huge change, because not having that demographic living around me and not being able to access them in the same way as friends and whatever. And so lots of people have said to me, oh, Jo, she's too touchy-feely. Well, it's cultural. And
Yeah.
I'm fighting against something that just comes naturally to me.
You're really talking about the English reserve, aren't you? That being 6 feet apart is no trouble for us.
Do you know, COVID has been the best thing for me, Michael? I kid you not. It's really given me an understanding of what that means to actually maintain distance. Because as I said, I've said in the past to various people, active listening for Italians is like being there in their face. It's not maintaining any distance at all, because it's like, oh, if I'm distant from you, I'm not listening. So yes, it's been a good time for me, really good time to understand that. But I don't necessarily, the weird thing is, Michael, is that it's not a bad thing to be, that the two cultures are not, they're just so different.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that does make it really hard for people to understand who are not brought up with a completely different culture to understand something like me. And I have struggled, particularly in church circles, for that.
But it's interesting that I think when we spent time in Africa and in the Middle East, you begin to think, how is that other person thinking? You've got to think culturally. And I think that helps us in Bible study. I mean, when we do a talk on one of the, I'm doing one tomorrow on one of the disciples, I try and put myself in their position, in their culture, which is not England.
Yeah.
I think when you're handling, as you obviously do, the children and families work, I think you've got a running advantage in knowing different cultures and how so-and-so would react to something.
Yeah.
What's permissible and what's not. What's appreciated and what's not.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And before I did the job that I do now, but the two previous jobs, I was in a language college for 17 years. So I knew people from all over the world. So that cultural understanding, yes, I definitely do have, from teaching people from all over the world, males and females. And, that's another interesting area, is how to behave as a female towards men from Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth. That was a huge learning curve as well.
Yeah. I know when we meet our groups before going to the Middle East particularly, and talk about what to do and what not to do, like taking pictures of women and so on. And I generally say, well, okay, if we were out in Ringwood as husband and wife, would you want some total stranger taking a picture of your wife? You wouldn't.
Yeah, of course.
That's the sort of thing. Anyway, let's get on. Avon Valley Churches always sounds very grand, doesn't it? I'm in the team as very much a retired and still learning. But how do you find it coming up from Christchurch into the Avon Valley Churches, meeting up with families, children, and particularly all the children's work you're doing in preparation for Christmas? What do you feel about being in that team?
So Avon Valley, so applying for the job for me, it was very much about moving outside of my parish in Muddyford. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I loved the time that I had there, but I was ready for a new challenge at that stage of my life. And I loved the idea of coming to Fordingbridge and having the 7 churches. I thought that was so exciting. And I have to say, team ministry, how wonderful is team ministry? And when you look at it across the benefits, we have, not only do we have a wonderful retired priests like you and Kate and John, who are working just as hard as you were when you were actually at work, I'm sure. but we've also got this wonderful group of BCMs. We've got Julian as BPP.
Hang on. What's a BCM, please?
Oh yes, a bishop. Some people who are licensed to have a particular role in the benefice. So we have some people who have a BCM in worship, we have some who have pastoral, and I have youth, children and families with Carol. They're all different BCM streams.
Bishop Commission for Mission.
Bishop's Commission for Mission.
Just for those who don't know who are watching us today.
Yeah, sorry, we use these acronyms, don't we, in churches, and thank goodness we know what they I don't think other people do. And as I said, Julian's done a year's worth of theology training to do a bishop's commission to preach. So there are so many people who not only have been trained, but also can and regularly do lead stuff. I wanted to say about Avon Valley churches was that one thing that has been really clear to me is how important it is for ministry people to live in the geographical area. Like when I took the job, I thought, oh, it's not that far away and I'm not going in like every day or whatever. But it's been a real challenge. It's just like half an hour drive. It's just too far.
Yeah.
As it were. So.
Yes, I find the same. I mean, we live at Ringwood, which is only about 6-8 miles away from Hyde or Fordingbridge, but it's just not the same as being a minister in a parish where you feel you've got responsibility for people and you meet them at the school gate or wherever. So I can understand what you feel on that. And I always think of you when we're halfway between Hungerford and Fordingbridge. So I think of you, the journey you have.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it gives you a bit of breathing space, I guess, to opt out.
As well. Yeah.
Go home to a family. I mean, you've husband and daughters. To spend time with them. Yeah.
Well, yes and no, Michael, because I was involved in ministry here for over 10 years. Yeah. So I know so many people down here. So you actually have to go away, don't you? Yeah. And for me, I don't mean Sicily, because when I go to Sicily, because I have this long family line, I know so many people, and if I don't know them, they certainly know me. Oh dear. Anyway.
But you've spoken about the variety in the team up at Avon Valley, mixture of clerics, retired, and very talented lay people in all sorts of ways, pastoral and theological. Why do you think more people aren't actually involved in ministry? How would you like to see lay people, etc., involved in ministry more?
I mean, personally, I think that because I remember, and I don't know who else may remember this. In fact, I know Jeremy does because we were talking about it yesterday. I remember when BCM first came out and people were so cynical about BCM. They said, what's this for? Why are we doing this? We don't need to do this. What's the point of it? And I was one of those people. I can't lie. I only did, and you know, Gary will verify this. I only did BCM for children, youth and families because it was in line with my job at Avon Valley Church. So I felt it was the right thing to do to actually be involved in that training. But I loved it. I absolutely loved every minute of it because it really does what it says on the tin. It's a bishop's commission for mission. So it's all about mission, i.e., what is mission? How do we do it? And how do we sort of plan for it as well? Rather than just going in and saying, oh, I've got a great idea, let's do this. Actually thinking about this much larger picture of mission. So for us, I mean, I felt after BCM that I had an opportunity to understand different, be able to look at the whole picture of children, youth and families and say, okay, what is it we are doing, which is great, which actually I still maintain for us has always been, we do great schools work. There's so much that happens in schools. that we have done, and that's been amazing, and church stuff. The thing that we haven't done so much of is just general community outreach. And we have done a bit, but not lots. So that's still the thing that we're working on, and we're certainly working on with Christmas in a Bag.
Would you say that the openings are there in schools and have grown over the last few years because teachers prefer, shall we say, Christian outsiders to come in when they haven't perhaps got Christian members of staff, or people who are trained in other religions or experience of other religions to be part of the teaching program in schools?
So I would say, I mean, at Bremer and Hyde, they're Church of England schools, so there is an expectation that they may be involved with the priest, the local priests, whoever they may be, whether they're rectors or whether they're associate priests or children and families workers. But I think we did a whole module on this at Moorlands, all about culture and how culture sits alongside Christ. There's a really well-known book that all theologians at some point will have dipped into. Actually, shall I show it to you? Hold on. There it is. It's myself. Do you remember this book, Michael?
We had one called Customs, Culture and Christianity, but I think we were really asked to read that before going and working in Africa. It's helped a great deal to just be aware that other people are thinking differently. And if somebody says something, if you have a split second to think about it, you've got to ask, why are they thinking that, or why are they saying that?
Yeah.
What's the background?
And often it's lack of understanding more than actually people saying or wanting to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing. So I'm actually quite passionate about this. Good. About how are we Christians, but how do we work with culture, but also we are countercultural. So it's those two things.
Yeah.
But often we can't, if we just go ahead. So if I just took some of those really contentious verses from the Bible and I said, right, we're just going to throw these out here and see how they land, probably it would bring some people to God, but the vast majority of people would be completely turned off by those. And that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? As public theologians, that's the word I'm going to use. We're trying to share the gospel, but in a way that people understand. Yep. And that's very much at the heart of Youth, Children and Families work. And that's where it's different from the rest of the ministry that happens, because we're often working, I mean, I am also working through churches, but also we're doing something where the church itself might have no involvement. So I'm actually going and deployed to different places. And that's all of what I'm kind of involved with, is trying to just, I think for a lot of people, the journey to Christ takes many, many years. And it is just those tiny seeds. But then for other people, they just check, it can be so instant. And then suddenly their life is transformed and their heart is transformed. And you never know what you're, whether what you're doing and how what you're doing is going to impact people. But we know it does, because they give us feedback, don't they, over time?
Oh, they do, yeah, absolutely. And isn't it, wouldn't you say, I'm looking at the clock now, or you're looking at the clock?
I know, we've been for ages, haven't we? We could chat for ages, Mike. We must stop. Did I answer your question? I can't even remember now.
I think what I want to finish with is something about prayer, really, that if we actually pray simply at the beginning of each day, that we mean not only do God's will generally and meet people, but when we meet people, before opening our mouths, we listen. You know, we're given one of these and two of these
For a reason.
for a reason. And then at the end of the day, just saying to God, well, I might have got it wrong, but let's hope some seed was sown somewhere. Whether you said anything you did or whatever. But if our ministry is prayer rooted, whether it's lay or clerical, whatever it is, it's up to God then, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
If we're here to bring people to the Lord Jesus Christ and faith in him, it's up to God at the end of the day for us to be part of a channel for that. And I mean, people come to Christ suddenly. I think, yes, it certainly dawns over a period of time, but I've met people who have been really skeptical, and suddenly something has hit them. I remember a friend I had some time ago now went up to the Royal Albert Hall to listen to the Messiah as a piece of music. And halfway through found himself in floods of tears as a grown man. And God spoke to him in a totally non-church situation. But I mean, the Messiah is all scripture, as you know. So through the word of God, he was converted and then went into ministry. So the journey may be long or short, but God gets us somehow, doesn't he?
Yeah. And it's just such a wonderful time, actually. That's how I compare it. I just think my life before Christ and my life since Christ, I mean, I can't compare like the two lives. It's just so different.
What age were you then?
So for me, it wasn't that long ago. So 2011, when I really knew that the weird thing was, Mike, is I'd always believed in God. I was taught it at school, actually. Still, I must have been one of those last sort of generations of people who are still taught it in a community school. God created the world.
Yeah.
And from being told that, and I can even see the book that they showed us with the world in it, and it said God created the world. I never doubted that. But the key for me was knowing Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, without knowing how Jesus fits into this narrative, you can't be a Christian. It's all, you know, I don't want to say it's all about Jesus, but he is like so important. So if we, and I think sometimes it can be difficult, because when you're trying to speak in different circumstances with different people, and you say, well, which bit, because often if you talk about God, you can share many views with Muslims and with Jewish people, but as soon as over Jesus is like the real, obviously, sticking point. So it's, and that's what I find so fascinating, is trying to see my way through all of this and say, well, how can I talk about all of this? But really crucially as well, as a Christian, be true to your own faith. That's the hardest bit, is saying, have I said anything that is actually sort of going against my own Christian faith? So that's what we do all the time, isn't it, Michael?
That's probably a very good note to end on. Is there anything else you'd like to finish the conversation with? Because you've seen so many conversations and thought for the days. Have you ever thought, I wish somebody would say that, or have you actually said it? Because I think what you've really said, we may know our faith, we may know the Bible academically, but to know Jesus personally is the crux of the whole thing. And unless we know Jesus personally, we're not there yet.
I am going to say, Michael, that for me, when I did Alpha in 2009, at the time of doing Alpha, I thought it wasn't for intelligent people. That sounds really rude, and I don't want to be rude, but I suppose when you've had a certain level of education anyway, you sort of take a course like Alpha and you think, well, yeah, there's nothing to really get my teeth into. But that was the point. That it was all about relationship. So when the leader, and it was the Youth, Children and Families worker we had in Muddyford, when the leader, Joe, said to me, you know, you should pray. And I said to him, and I you know, I tell you really openly and honestly now, I said to him, there's no point in praying, it doesn't work. And he said to me, he said, okay, you don't have to pray for me, that's fine, but I will pray for you. And that act of saying, in spite of you, I will pray for you, that is the transformational stuff. That is the stuff that you go, you know, it's so, go back to this, countercultural, to say, I care enough about you. So when I had the Holy Spirit Day and all that stuff that Alpha does, I didn't have any sense of anything happening on that day. I remember I was such an obstinate person, honestly. I'm like the worst person who's refusing to accept Jesus Christ into their life at that point. And I remember that this guy said that he, one of the leaders, he was a URC minister, he said, Mark, lovely guy, he said, I wanted to be able to speak in tongues so much that I sat there for over 24 hours praying to have the gift of tongues, and God gave him the gift. And I turned around to him on the day and I said, I don't want to speak in tongues. That's the last thing I want to do. And you know, but this is all part of the journey, isn't it, Michael? Is that where I was at that stage in 2000 and no, I don't think it was 2009, 2010. From then, so in 10 years, if I try to compare what's happened in my life and the road it's taken me and all the stuff that's happened, well, I just can't. I just love this life with God.
Yeah.
You know, I love having Jesus at the center of my life, and I just can't imagine my life without Jesus now. I just can't.
Joe Heath, thank you so much.
Was that my...
that was awesome. Okay, thanks, Joe. Been a great Saturday morning, and I hope
thank you, Michael. I'll see you soon.
I hope people watching this will come back to you and pick up some of the things that you said today. Very, very helpful. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Love to the family.
Thanks, Michael. Bye.